What's up, everybody, and welcome to the 28th episode on my 1976 F750 CrewCab build series. In the previous episode, you watched us relocate my ECM box, which means in today's episode, we are running the wiring harnesses to both the driver's side and passenger side door, while also running the entire wiring harness through the cab and in the dash. So there's nothing to it but to do it. Stay tuned. I'm going to come inside the cab and start dealing with some more wiring. Sorry, I don't have a light right here. We were about to. So I'm going to actually remove the doors first. We don't need them on. I'm going to remove them all. We actually removed the back driver's side one already forever ago. That was like one of the very first things we ever did. So I'll remove these other three because I need to get all the wiring dialed in for the doors. So luckily this is just an XL donor truck, 6.7 Powerstroke, so there really isn't a whole lot of wiring that's involved. So I got this guy right here, and I have the female end right here. This goes and mounts inside of the door, or on the cab, but right next to the door in the donor truck. So essentially this guy right here will fit somewhere right in here, and then this guy goes through the door somewhere right in here, and this rubber grommet is what keeps it sealed, kind of like this. Sorry, again, I'll bring the light over so you guys can see this while I work on it. Anyways, I can't access anything. I can access this side of the door, but I can't access anything at the cab with the doors on. So I need to remove the door, and essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out a good spot to mount this, which I'm thinking right back there. And then I'm going to find a good spot on the door to cut a hole and mount this. Now these wiring harnesses might not have to be extended, but this rubber grommet slash hose will, because it's only X amount long. So if I mount this guy back there, I'm gonna have issues with length of this guy. And I can't mount, well, I might be able to mount it here. I might be able to move this module back or up or down and mount this female end right in here somewhere. So I'm just gonna have to play around with it. I can't play around with it until the doors are off, hence why we're removing them, so that way I have access to everything, can get good measurements, can get a good idea, and figure out where I need to cut on both the door and the cab, so that way I can have all the door wiring done and out of the way. I just removed the doors like you guys just saw on the time lapse, and Kyle and I just discussed where the wiring harnesses should go. So in the factory 6.7 Powerstroke, they go somewhere on this cab, and we're going to try to emulate that and put it in the relatively similar location. My first plan was to put it right here because there is some extra space on this backside. That is actually factory on these 76 cabs. You can see it over there as well. But Kyle suggests putting it right here because it gives us a little bit more space for the door side of the wiring harness and this rubber protective coating that covers the wires from the elements and stuff like that. So the game plan is to take my template from the donor truck that I just went out and got, place it right in here, cut it out, and that way this guy will be able to just shove in right there. We have enough clearance on the backside. We will probably have to remove this, but that's fine. These are just in with self-tappers until we have a final location, and we will use rivet nuts. But essentially we put this here just because it landed there with all the wiring harnesses relatively naturally, but we can move it, we can place it right here, we can move it up and down just to accommodate this door wiring harness that I'm going to toss in right now. So that's the game plan. Cut a hole, shove it in there, and then I will take this guy right here and I will go to the door and I will figure out exactly where it needs to go, which should be right around here, and I will make sure that that's a good part of the door to cut into, and I will also cut into that guy, so that way we can put it back onto the truck, marry the two, and make sure that the wiring harnesses are somewhat in correlation with each other when it's done.
Alright you guys, it is a new day here back at the shop and I am still working on the passenger side door wiring harness. I started this yesterday and got pretty far along, but there's still a little bit left that I need to do in order to have this 100% complete. So let's go see what we have to do today. As you guys just saw, we finished the male and female version of this door wiring harness. Also, I apologize for shadows. It is bright and early here at the shop, so we are dealing with aftermarket lighting. Anyways, we finished the wiring harness, male and female version, and now we need to figure out exactly where this rubber boot and this wiring harness enters into the door panel. So I'm going to take some measurements. It's going to be roughly right in this section right here, which is good because on the back of all these bolt holes there is structural support because obviously your hinges mount there. So there's going to be structural support somewhere right in here, as well as there and there. Just like the door had it, we didn't take this into account. I should have when I planned this out, but see right here, there's structural support here, there, and underneath. So we lucked out with this right here. We didn't run into any of it, and there's no issues with the wiring or clipping in. But this guy, we do need to make sure that we have some clearance. I'll get a light in there and see exactly where it needs to go, but we are thinking somewhere right in here should be the money spot, out of the way of all the bracing, and a very clear and straight shot to all of the internals of the door panel. So I'm gonna get going on that, get some measurements from there, transport them to there. You guys will see that coming up, and hopefully here soon we have our rubber grommet going into our door panel. And we are done with the passenger side door wiring harness. Quick and easy. The longest part of this was literally putting the door back on because I couldn't get some of the hinge bolts to line up. They were kind of being kind of a pain in the butt, and they were a little rusty, so we are going to have to either replace them or soak them for final assembly. But very quick, very easy. Transporting over my template was really quick. As you guys see, the metal's all cleaned up. The rubber grommet fits right in there, and you can see obviously the rubber that goes to our female end of the wiring harness right there. So what I did was, in the factory truck, the 6.7 Powerstroke, there are places for these little Christmas trees. We're gonna have to find a place. This is actually for the door panel, so I just popped it there.
What I was doing was I was opening and closing the door with my hand inside just to make sure that the wires aren't being pulled on. Essentially, you clip it somewhere and you have some extra wiring space, so that way when the door is completely opened, that extra wiring kind of expands, and then when you close it, it not really crunches up, but it kind of condenses and you have a lot more slack in the line. So I was just opening and closing it like you guys saw, just to make sure that we are not pulling on the wiring itself. And we're not. There's a lot of space. This feels really nice. It does have a little bit of a 90 right there, but that's no big deal. This is just for the elements, so that way the wires aren't exposed. Obviously this is outside. When the door is open, closed, the moisture can get to it. So that's just protective coating. But the wiring, when I open and close it, is not condensing at all. It's not being stretched. But yeah, there you guys have it. So now I need to jump to the driver's side and do the exact same thing with the driver's side harness, which is right here. And you guys will see that next. I just finished the passenger side wiring harness from the cab to the door. Technically it's not 100% complete because we do still have to put this side of the wiring harness into the door. But like I mentioned previously, we don't know if we're actually using this door yet or if we're going to use the donor truck. So there's no sense in cutting a hole into this door if we're not going to use it. Honestly, that's about the quickest part of this entire project, was cutting that hole into the passenger side. So we're going to hold off on that. It's only going to take us a couple minutes if we have to do the donor truck door, so I'm not too concerned about that. But just like the passenger side, we had to make almost like a pilot box cut on the back side, so that way the female side could fit through it, because we can't make it through any of these other holes down there. But just like the other side, super tight, super snug, very quick, and we're happy with the way it turned out. So with that being done, I get to clean out the cab of the truck and start running the wiring harness in a very rough location, so that way we can figure out exactly where everything goes. So we do have a lot of it pinned down already. We have a lot of it labeled. We just need to figure out where exactly this will be mounted throughout the dash. So for example, this was mounted on the actual dash itself. On the donor truck, you had almost like a skin, and then under the skin you had the actual metal frame of the dash, and that's where a lot of these attach to. Now clearly we don't have that, so we are going to remove this and just access the wiring harness itself and figure out the best place on where to put everything. It is
not self-explanatory, but the nice thing is it does want to lay in its original location. So for example, these wiring harnesses we know go to the back of the truck. We also know this tees off goes to the middle for all your seat sensors, seat belts, stuff like that. A lot of this stuff will lay exactly where it laid in the donor truck just because that's where it wants to, and obviously you can't just swap things back and forth because of the hiring or the wire harness configuration. And so for example, we have things like this that they attach to certain things that are fixated on the truck already. So this guy right here, it attaches to the emergency brake pedal as well as the hood latch, which goes here. This is also where it went in the donor truck, so we know for fact, 100% certainty that this has to go right here. So essentially you just figure out a starting point and run with it. Hopefully it doesn't take too long, but that's my next task. On top of that, we aren't going to permanently fix it to anything yet. We will be using self-tappers just to get a general but educated location on where the wiring harness will go. And then after paint, or when we're 100% certain, we'll come back and use these guys, a little bit fancier, a little bit more high-tech and clean for the final product. We aren't sure which ones we'll be using, maybe a mixture of all of them to complete this project, but we're just going to use what we have on hand, and hopefully that'll work. It'll look nice and clean. Essentially just bolt it to the firewall. We will have rivet nuts on the back side, so everything will be really nice, really tidied and really lined out. And then you just zip tie it to here. But that is what I'm working on now. Kyle is still going to town on the grill over there. My voice cracked.
All right.
I will give you guys an update on the grill and on the wiring as soon as I'm done with it, and you guys will see a time lapse of it right now. All right, you guys, I just finished gosh dang it, Kyle's here. He's making me scared. I just finished running the wiring harness for the dash. I essentially started on one side and worked my way to the other side, and it actually went relatively well. I was thinking it was going to take me a lot longer than what it did, but luckily, kind of throughout this project, Kyle and I have been labeling the wiring harness as we've gone, just as well as we've worked on other things. So for example, we've done all of the dash components for like the heat and the cooling, as well as like the radio and obviously the steering column when we worked on that, and then the gauge cluster. So a lot of this stuff is labeled. We just have to essentially put it where we think we're going to use it and put it on the final assembly. So starting from the right side, I pretty much put everything into that fuse box that's on the ground right there, and worked my way up and around and onto this other side. The way the wiring harness is going to have to be run, since we don't have that skeleton metal piece from the donor truck, is we are going to attach it to the hood cowl kind of right there on the firewall. It's going to tuck underneath the HVAC, underneath all of the windshield wiper assembly, and then back up to the hood cowl over on this side. We need plenty of room for the windshield wiper assembly to be able to move right from left. And also we just need it to be tucked back there for the sake of not having a ton of wiring on the front side of the dash when we plug everything in. Kyle and I were talking about just how quickly and easily it's going to go together, because a lot of these plugs are just made for the female end and the male end, obviously. So there's a lot of stuff that won't actually connect to another thing, which is one nice thing. So you know when you put the female end...
It's nice when one thing doesn't connect to one thing. It's a nice thing.
It's a very nice thing. Word vomit right there. So essentially when you're plugging stuff in, there's really only one male end for one female end, and so you know you have it in the right spot. And also Kyle and I talked about how everything is kind of pre-bent, and this has been in the truck for almost 10 years, in the donor truck. So everything is already pre-bent and lays where it wants to lay, so that also helps you figure out exactly where everything needs to go. But this is pretty much it. There's a couple things that aren't plugged in just because we're going to have to wait until the dash is in on final assembly to plug them in, hence all of this stuff. But we pretty much have it coming out where they all need to go. Like this guy, the radio wiring over there. We don't know if it's going to go out to the original spot, which is up there on the hood, or if it's going to go on the roof. We have talked about putting like a CM radio up top, like a semi-truck, but we're undecided on that. So everything is pretty much in its final spot, and now we kind of get to move on to another fun task.
All right, you guys, that's gonna be a wrap for today's episode. We got both doors wired up. We got the entire wiring harness to the cab as well as the dash, which means in the next episode, we can install the dash once again and make sure that all the connections match up, line up, and are in a good spot for final assembly. So we really appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you on the next one.